Hey YouTubers, welcome back to the Evil Bad Book Club, where we're going over chapter 15 of the Turner Diaries. So in the beginning of this chapter, Catherine's talking to Turner and going over, a bunch of different things with him as far as what he's missed out on when he was in prison. And it seems that the organization has come up with a counterfeit method for counterfeiting, money, and that's one of the ways that they're now able to fund their guerrilla organization. So, the other thing is they've got to find all these resources now, and they've got to come up with resources for making bombs and things like that, because they can no longer count on breaking into armories and things of that matter, because security's through the roof now. Can't mail anything, everything's getting x-rayed. Buildings have metal detectors now and such. So it's definitely a heightened sense of security, kind of like what we're dealing with now in our world, where since 9/11, security started getting ramped up, and they used that as an excuse, and it's stayed ramped up. And now you've got security for, the sickness that's going around. So now, that's playing a factor for us as well. So they have to figure out base items to make their explosive devices. And so they break everything down into like 3 different basic lists, from like hardest to obtain to easiest. So they separate everything, and it's a good way, and it's a good idea. If you are trying to accomplish a goal, you've got to have your goal and then break it down. How do you get to the end? So you start with your goal, and then you figure out all the steps that you need to make to get to the goal. You deconstruct it. You basically do it in reverse to figure out what you need to do to get to where you want to be. And so that's what they do to get the material. They need, timing devices, detonators, chemicals, all that stuff. So they figure all that out. They also have to figure out ways to get chemicals or different inks for counterfeiting. And now they've got a new hideout, and which brings up a kind of a cool idea. They're hiding in plain sight. So now, instead of hiding in a blacked out windowed building in a manufacturing area, they're basically on Main Street in a print shop, and they're actually running a business, during the day, and printing stuff in the back at night for the organization. They're printing stuff, and then of course they're making communication devices or bombs or whatever. But they're doing it out in the open. They just keep their prices so high that they don't get too busy with orders, but they're still kind of making a living, or money's coming in to their legitimate business. And then you also find out that the organization has figured out a way to counterfeit, which I don't think they're really counterfeit identifications and social security cards for the members. What I think has happened, and what it alludes to, is basically they find somebody that kind of matches someone in the organization's looks, and they basically kill them and steal all their information. So identity theft, old school. So they hide in plain sight. Now they've got some form of IDs that can work, and now the system or the government has in place electronic devices to check identifications and stuff. So you can't go and purchase any food or gas or mail or anything without using either your driver's license or one of these new government issued identifications. So again, that kind of plays into things that we see now, um, you know, in this book because of when it was written. You know, it's basically a lower tech system than what we have now. I think, you know, the author, William Pierce, if he had seen what is going on now, you know, he'd be like, holy cow, he'd be going crazy, because we're so far beyond that. And before we even had problems with this sickness and that, you know, it's gotten to, you know, worse than it was in the book. And I don't think we're even under that same type of situation, or even nearly close to that kind of situation. And we are still locked down and have lost more of our freedoms than these people in many ways. Another thing that happens in this chapter, we find out that the FBI is basically giving information to a foreign group, basically the Israelis, letting them know of different people that they suspect are in this organization, and then the Israelis do their due diligence, trying to figure out whether or not a person is or not, and then they basically eliminate them. So members of the organization are just turning up dead all over the place, and that's kind of affecting morale to a certain extent. And then in the chapter, you know, they go over how they get some of their material, different resources that they try to use, and they decided that they need, you know, a certain watch to use as a timer for their detonating devices. So they work out a scheme to get some, and it goes sideways on them. But you know, when they go to get the watches, they basically order a ton of watches, and they plan on just going in there like they're gonna pay for them and then doing a grab and dash type thing. But it doesn't work out, so they end up having to show their guns and do some squirrely stuff to get away with the watches. But one of the interesting things they do is like something similar to the bank robbers you always hear about, or in movies. You know, they take their vehicle to a mall and park it on one side, and then they travel to the other side of the mall parking lot and basically steal a car. And you know, when the book was written in the 70s, and then again even in the 90s, you know, you probably could have got away with that pretty easily. But with today's all the cameras and things that are around today, they would have had a harder time, or at least it would have been easier to track them back to their original vehicle, and from that figure out who they were or where they were coming from. So kind of cool, kind of interesting. You know, the book's, you know, moving along quite nicely now. You're finding out more and more things about, you know, the organization and the system being the government, the organization being this guerrilla group or revolutionaries. So it's staying pretty interesting, this chapter. You know, you pick up a few things, but nothing major as far as I could see. Just the breaking down of lists and how to acquire stuff. So that's my takeaway for this chapter. Come back Monday. We'll go over chapter 16. I'll check you YouTubers out later.